Okay, so for the first part of my exploration and interrogation sort of brief, obviously I was tasked myself with creating a library of stuff, a library of assets, and one of those things I wanted to make was textures in Substance Designer, because the importance of making your own textures as a 3D artist is, I think, quite a underrated skill that a lot of people think that they don't necessarily need. So that's why I'm taking this time to try and learn and get better with it. And I've taken the time over the past 2-3 days to explore a little and experiment while also making my first texture for my project. So obviously this is a Wattle and Daub inspired material. Let me quickly crank up the height scale so we can kind of see what we're working with here. So I'm going to quickly just talk you through some of the things which I have learned whilst creating this material. One of the big things, fundamentals even, which I kind of learned about was when it comes to making your own texture, it's good to start from the height level and the normal level and start to sort of build your way up in detail, and then last but not least, obviously, get your color in. So I did have 2 passes at making this material. The first pass, I did manage to get something pretty good, but it wasn't quite, what's the word? But it wasn't quite as optimized as it could have been. When it comes to actually making this material, it was actually quite complex, I think, for a beginner material, but I managed to do it. So I am pretty pleased with that. So let's sort of take you through what I've got going on here. So I guess let's just start at the beginning, and we can sort of work our way from there. So I've kind of color coded everything a little. So anything that's grey deals with grayscale maps. So things like height, obviously, roughness and all that kind of thing is all being dealt with in here. Speaking of, actually, I don't think I've actually made a roughness map yet. No, I haven't. Okay, I completely forgot to do that. Okay, I'll have to get back around to doing that. But for right now, this is going to be fine to show you kind of what I've learned and the trajectory I'm on. I didn't really want to make a time lapse because I normally like making time lapses of my work, but I feel like if I time lapsed what I've been doing over the past few days, it would just be a lot of Google Chrome content, a lot of watching, a lot of learning, and I've got a few resources open just to show you. Hang on. Here we go. Sorry, I had to do a bit of troubleshooting before I recorded this because the video was being a pain, so I had to fix that. But anyway, but yeah, so of the videos which that I have been watching. This is a really good sort of series of videos. It kind of takes you through the intro to Substance Designer. Not a complete beginner, so I knew some of the basics like controls and the sort of layout of it. It's quite self-explanatory, I think. But yeah, anyway, point is that this is a really good resource which I learned quite a bit from. And then I've also been sort of pulling information from different sources to kind of get to this end result. So I learned a lot of like fundamentals and the way of thinking about making a material from this playlist. Again, about sort of building up your height first and then going into your color, etc. And then I've also learned a few ways you can go about creating wood grain and then also coloring your wood grain. And then there was also this really useful playlist on ArtStation Learning about, well, basically it just tells you about a bunch of nodes which are really quite useful and a few use case scenarios. So the one I found most useful was this height blend one, which I didn't know existed until I found this. And that's what eventually led me to actually being able to blend these two different heights in together. But you'll see that when we get a bit more into it. So the first thing I want to take you through is I think we're going to start with the wattle, which is the interlacing wood material. I'll quickly show you a. Bear with me. Quickly show you some of the reference I've been kind of working with to sort of gauge what I want. So this is from ArtStation. I can't quite remember the name of the artist, so I do apologize. But this is a great reference for what my material I kind of wanted mine to look like. And then this is for a later material. But yeah, that's sort of my inspiration. And yeah, that's sort of that so far. Okay, so we've talked a little bit about my inspiration for the material and all that, but yeah, let's get into actually breaking it down. So the material kind of obviously is built up of two main parts. We've got the wattle, we've got the daub. So first of all, I had to tackle each independently, and I started with the grayscale values because from this information you can also use that sort of height information to then build up your color. So it's always a good idea to start with your height info. So with that being said, let's take a little look here. So to get this wattle effect, we first of all start with a very basic shape, a square. Now something I also learned was that you can chuck in as much detail and as tightly compact as you want. Now I'm pretty sure you'll probably lose that detail obviously between scaling up and scaling down things. But I think the important part is that you're getting that detail in there, and if you can still see the detail when it's sort of down-resed in nodes, then you'll be able to actually see it in the actual 3D thing, and it'll just add to the detail and break up the model, and again just get more good stuff in there, I guess. But yeah, anyway, we start with the basic shape. This node just lets you create whatever you want. I went with a square, give it some scale, happy days. I then grabbed a gradient linear, and I'll show you why I'm doing this pretty soon. You might be able to figure it out. But the whole point of this is so that I'm getting, and sort of at this point, building up the actual 3D scale or the 3D shape of the wattle, I suppose, with a gradient. And then I'm doing something very similar with this blend, except this time I'm just giving it some nice shadowed edges. And obviously where the shadows are the strongest is where the wood will start to bleed out. And to just give it a bit of a nicer smooth bleed, I decided to chuck on a little bit of a blur. There's two different blur nodes. This one is the better one. It's heavier, but the other blur node makes things look like crap. I mean, you can already see if we keep it quite low, you'll see it's quite a square sort of. It's almost like a bevel effect on the blur, and yeah, it looks horrid. So this one doesn't do that at all. As you can see, it's got none of those harsh edges. It's just a nice blur, which is exactly what I wanted. But yes, then we get into some of the more complex stuff. So now we're starting again to making the actual weaving shape. Now, at this point of the project is where going back to revise it was actually a really good idea, because there was a few issues. When I first made this material, I also, well, after I had made the actual shape and the pattern, I had then also layered in this. I had actually put this material on top to give, I'll show you just as an example, to give us this. Now, if I plug this straight into the height, it's not going to be good. And the reason that it's not going to be good is because of the way that all these shadows are working. So as much as all this would be great, when I was looking at it in my tessellated or height parallax or whatever it is view, things were just not looking as sort of smooth as I wanted the wooden beams to be. So this is at the point of the project where, again, going back to revise was a really good idea, because I decided to sort of split up the levels of detail into two major groups. I have my main height detail, and then I also have my normal detail. So I'm using the height detail to drive sort of bigger movements in the material, and then I'm using normal to add further detail, like again these wooden bits. So I'm just going to focus on the height stuff first, because it's a little easier to go through, just as a way of talking about it. But yeah, so anyway, let's start. So we're first of all starting with obviously we've got our blur, and then our blur shape is then going into a tile generator. Now, this is where things get a little complicated. So first of all, the first thing I'm doing in this actual generator is I'm rotating the shape, and I'm also tiling it a lot, as you can see. And then I'm also doing something very similar here, and eventually these two shapes marry up to create this. I'm also at the same time scaling both of these textures up. Now, some people might think, or might get a bit scared and think, oh dear, isn't that going to break like tiling and all sorts? It might, if you don't push this button. if you start to make transformations in the transformation 2D node that aren't quite square, then yeah, you will probably break some tiling and you'll start to see issues. But as you can see, it tiles no problem at all in our 2D view here, and the same obviously goes for this one, obviously even after scaling. Now, something I'm quickly doing on these beams here, these ones that sort of go vertically, I am, first of all, before I'm marrying them up, I'm making these a bit darker. And the reason I'm doing that in the levels node is because if I kept them at the same height, they were giving me a weird sort of bump, which I didn't quite like. So that's why I've decided to go ahead and not have it do that. So instead, it is just a little beam that goes through that is visible, so that you can kind of see some of the inner structure that's going on. So after we do that, I'm then blending them together, and then obviously we get this shape, which is great. And then I'm putting them into a histogram range. Now, the reason I'm putting them into a histogram range, and what the hell even is that, it beats me, to be honest. But basically what this is doing is it's sort of evening out all the values for me. And I'm doing the same with the Daub material down there, which I'll get to later. But just note that this is just preparing it to get... it's preparing it for the height blend. And one final thing I'm doing at the very end here is I'm giving it a warp, which is just being driven by this Gaussian noise, and it gives us this nice warp effect, right? The same Gaussian noise is also going up to this one up here, which, as you can see, is the one that actually has all of this detail on it. And yeah, that's great. So to get that though, I decided to basically take our shape here, and I'm blending it with our 2D 2D wood thing there. Now, the reason that I have a transform 2D here is because I have to apply two different versions of the wood texture, because if I quickly show you, because I can, as you can see, that doesn't look quite right, and that just looks like that wood is continuing, which I suppose could work, but it's not what I'm going for, and that's not how Wattle is built up. So that looks far better, so I have to do this so that I can, so I have to keep these separate still. So yeah, that's how I'm doing that. I'm just taking them out of the transforms just before they get blended together down here. So after I blend them then with our 2D texture up here, and then blending them together, just like I'm doing down here, but this time they obviously have all of this lovely wood detail. And then that is also getting warped in the exact same direction because they're both the exact same warps with the same intensities and with the exact same noise. Only difference is what I'm putting into them. Before I continue on, I'm going to quickly go into my wood stuff. Also, you'll notice that I figured out that you can use like portals, I believe they're called, in here, which I didn't know was a thing, and it also made making this far more organized far easier. But yeah, so I managed to do a lot of organization using these, and it is delicious. You can see I may have even gone a bit mad. But yes, anyway. So this is how I'm making the actual wood texture. This is literally a one-to-one of the wood grain stuff here. It is literally one-to-one because I just thought it looked good, so I decided to just piggyback off that. And why reinvent the wheel, hey? So yeah, and this is basically it. One thing I did learn from doing this was that the warp node is a lot more versatile and you can be a lot more creative with your nodes. I was thinking very two-dimensionally about how you can use the warp. So obviously this is our blurred anisotropic noise, but this warp node is actually being driven by a generator, a tile generator, which is just making a few dots, and all those dots are then just pushing away pixels and making these little spots. It almost looks like a car windscreen or something with like rain on it. But then I'm also driving this sort of shape. I'm also then blending in this, so it looks like all these little dots then have, are then actually being like pressed into the actual texture, which I thought was really cool. And then I'm further warping the texture again, just with the purlin. And then I can't remember what the gradient dynamic's doing, but yeah, that's well, it's done. I'm pretty sure it's adding basically all the different values, all the different gradient values here into this. So we're just getting, a ton of crunchy detail, and I think that's the main takeaway. So I'll try and play around with that a bit more in my next materials, because I'm not 100% sure on how it works, but yeah, that is that. Then we're also doing a multi-directional warp of grayscale, which very low intensity, so I don't think you can really see much of the difference. It actually only looks like it's blurring it, to be perfectly honest, but it's doing some stuff. And then we're also scaling it again, just to sort of marry it up with the material a bit better. And then that's all getting plugged into a portal, and then obviously that's coming down here and getting put into there. Okay, I feel like we've gone through a good chunk of the graph already. So I guess let's go ahead and talk about the daub, and then we'll circle back around to how it all gets blended a little further down, because this is sort of, as you can see, yeah, end of the line stuff. But yeah, anyway. So the daub material is pretty easy. It is just basically a bunch of grayscale stuff getting changed around, sharpened. But one thing I would like to point out is, again, we're using the histogram range to sort of make all of the basic tier like stuff, or the basic, to make all of this sort of less bright, to sort of even out all the values of it. So instead of giving me like a bunch of really like rocky detail, or like really spiky, quite just noisy detail, this is sort of helping to even it out, and it's also giving me the same value as this histogram up here. So they're both quite even now ready to go into the blend, right? But you will notice that I do have some parts of the daub that is actually covering the wattle, and that is by intention, because that's been driven by this, because this is sort of an extra layer to the height, I guess. I would describe it as. It's what it's basically doing is it's kind of taking this final sort of lovely grey stuff, and it's giving it that final variation, that final really large variation in height, which you are seeing in some of these big clusters here. You can see here it's being replicated. This little white bit is this bit, and so on. But yeah, that's kind of how that's all working. But yeah, so anyway, that's how all that gets done. And then finally, those two obviously come in to get blended. Just a simple linear dodge, going into a levels, just to sort of adjust some of the colors, some of the lighter values. And then we're also taking this color and we're just putting a gradient map on it. I'm literally just giving it a bunch of colors, saying, enjoy, these are your colors for the different heights. There you go. And that's all it's doing. And then it's going into a portal for the Daub mat. And this one is coming through to a portal for our height, for our Daub. So I suppose we should also talk about the wood colouring, which is also, again, from that video. So we're basically getting this wood info height. As you can see, we're running it through an auto levels, which I believe, as the name suggests, will automatically level out all the colours in the map. And then I'm using a histogram select node, which is a good way to think about this node, I think, is you're sort of almost slicing down the middle of your texture and you're kind of chopping it up into your different layers. And as I move the position, you can sort of see it's almost like an MRI scan or something. I don't know if, this is one of the type, because before the revision, I did use this as well to also isolate the wood beams or the actual wattle in here to get the colors onto them that way. But again, I revised it because one of the big reasons was that I was struggling to get like specific masks from the material. And then I learned about the height blending node. And so I changed from just using a simple blend node to blend the two heights to the actual height blend node. And it just made everything so much better. But yeah, anyway, so that is that. And then I'm also driving it through another gradient map, just straight from the auto levels. And then I'm blending them. And the reason I'm blending them is just so I can have this sort of variation in color. And sort of gives me some darker areas in some of the, wood creases. And yeah, like this one. Like, as you can see, we got some lighter bits here. And yeah, it's all good. It's all good stuff. But yeah, then that gets put into the Wattle color. And then this is where we do all our color blending from our from obviously our wood and our Daub. But I'll come back to this because we need to actually go and talk about the height blending. So under height blendy stuff, as you can see, I'm very professional. We have a height blend node. Now this node is like magic. Basically, it's way better than using just a regular blend node because for a start it gives you controls in here to control the height, so you can sort of change them out and around. So if I just bring this up a bit, you'll start to see that the wattle protrudes a lot more. Now it looks like it's broken. It's not. Oh wait, no, it is. I thought that was going to fix itself. Never mind. But yes, as you can see, I can sort of control the height and I can sort of change how much Daub will be, or how much wattle will be exposed through the Daub. So we can sort of play with this and get to a value that we are happy with. But yeah, that's pretty cool. You can also change the contrast, but obviously because these are two very different materials, I want to make sure that the contrast is at maximum. So that's why the opacity is set to a very strong 1. Because, well, is it not obvious? So, yeah, I'm just going to put that back to where it was because I quite liked it there. Not there. There, yeah, okay. But yeah, so that is my height blend stuff, and then we are getting 2 different materials out of this, because the height blend is also good for another reason. Not only will it give you obviously your output material, your blended height, but it also gives you a height mask. That is literally what I needed and was trying ever so desperately to do in the previous revision of this material. So knowing that this exists and it can do it that easily is awesome to know. And as you can see, it is such a crisp map. It is wonderful. It is perfect, in fact. So using this information, I can do a lot of different things. I can isolate different areas, obviously, for coloring. I could do, I think, quite a bit with this. But anyway, but yeah, with that then, obviously this blended, our blended material height gets basically sent straight over to actually produce our height information. So yeah, it kind of goes straight in and into our material. Then the other version of it also goes into an AO map, which, as you can see, is producing us a lovely ambient occlusion map, which is very nice. But again, you will notice something. A few things, perhaps. Thing one is that these wooden beams don't have any normal detail on them at all. But we have some normals here. Where is that normal coming from? And I will show you. So, down here is our normal details. And this is where the fun begins, because I even have to look at this again to remember what I was doing. So, right, wood info height. Right, okay, so I remember. So what we're doing is we're first of all taking our mask that we got from our height blend, and we're using it to basically chop our actual texture here out. So we're just getting our wood info height, which, as you can see, was made over here earlier, as I showed you, as the top one. And then, after we chop it, we're able to then blend it back into this final material. I'm also using the height mask to then separate out basically the Daub version, and then I'm adding the Daub to the back, as you can see. And the reason I'm doing this is because I basically wanted to add a bit more variation to the normal. And if we zoom in here, you can see that it's not very noisy right now, and I wanted my normals to be a bit more noisy and have a bit more detail in them. And so that's why I added or introduced in the clouds, which gives us a bit more normal detail and does add to the overall sort of bumpiness and rock-likeness, I think, of the material. And then obviously those two just get blended together, and they get put into our normal node, into our normal portal, which is then put out in here. And this is then where obviously it all comes together to make our material. Lovely stuff. So that's kind of the majority of everything. Everything else is pretty self-explanatory. I think we did the wood coloring, yeah, we did that. Color blending, I don't believe we touched on. This was pretty simple. We just used the height mask from the actual material. So, this, we just used that. I can even show you. We just used that straight out of that to actually be the actual factor, I suppose, of the blend. And then we are just blending or just chucking in our wood and obviously our daub. And that's, I believe, everything. I think. I'm not sure how well I explained any of that. I'm not sure how well that'll come out on video. Not even sure if my recording's working. But I do know one thing for certain, and that is that this was a really fun project. Well, I say that as if I'm finished. That's it. Just one texture. That's it. No more. No. This was a really fun first asset to tackle in my library that I want to make. Yeah, because I want to make like a Wattle and Daub, because I'm going like Tudor, and obviously they use sort of this, I think it's called lime washed white walls for like the outside of the houses, but the walls were still like wattle and daub. So that's kind of what I'm doing here. Is I want to sort of make two variations of the wall. One which is just daub, and then I want to make one that's very similar to this one, but is entirely just wattle. Or I might just use this one, but just introduce more wattle. And the point in doing something like that is that I'd actually be able to, in Unreal Engine, then when I come to build my final scene, is I'll be able to just vertex paint. I'll be able to vertex paint in the damage, and hopefully it should look really sick, and it should mean that I get an even finer level of detail. And I wouldn't really change anything about the two textures. Literally, the only difference would be is that these wooden beams wouldn't be here. So yeah, it's really exciting, and I've been really enjoying working on this project. Again, there's a lot still to do. There's still a lot to learn, but I'm really enjoying it so far. Enjoying the process, and feeling very accomplished right now. I'm feeling very smug about myself. So yeah, this is how it's going. So yeah, hopefully that explains, or hopefully that helps make up for the fact I haven't done any time lapses. I'm gonna try do some if I feel confident in doing that, but it normally takes me a little while to get started with a material in here, so I might not, but I think I'll try at least. And yeah, but yeah, that's all from me. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. And yeah, I'm gonna go now. I'm gonna go do anything else for a minute, and then I'll probably come back. Okay, goodbye.